Working with Biosyn was not exactly King's go-to job decision. He was 35 years old, and he was also 18 years in debt. Being an up-and-coming research scientist in the field of animal behavior, workdays were pretty much an everyday experience for him. His main interest was the African lion. As he sat in his office in the Biosyn headquarters, he leaned back in his chair as he contemplated his current choices. After what had happened at the docks with Dodgson and that Basildon character, he began to wonder if what they were doing was truly in the world's best interests. Watching Dodgson and Basildon massacre at least 12.5 men was not specifically his idea for expanding awareness of their company's ideals. The memory of his main subject of research had caught his mind after what seemed like years. To him, lions were not only a mildly iconic species, but they also seemed to serve as a reminder of how the animal kingdom presumably functioned. For all he knew, there were animals out there that could turn at the snap of a finger and cause a global catastrophe. But hey, that's what almost happened 3 bloody years ago. Ever since the events at Lockwood's estate, he viewed the dinosaurs as neither a miracle or even a tool like Dodgson did. He viewed the species as a whole as a threat to the global ecosystem. Dinosaurs already had a shot at this world, gosh darn it. They already served their role. First came Hammond's little venture, his little game of God. He practically trapped those people on his demonic funhouse of an island, and only a few of them made it back to tell the tale. At first, when he heard it, he merely shrugged it off. The heck with it. Dinosaurs, ha! What exactly are they putting in that Red Bull these days? But when he heard of how Malcolm told the same story again, 4 years later, he started to truly get suspicious. He asked around to find someone who was in on the whole thing and tried to get answers to his riddle, and then came the incident of 2015. This time, it was a lot more public. A lot more witnesses. At that time, his research on lion anatomy was in jeopardy of being cut from Stanford University. His pockets were really getting empty at this point, and he was desperate. Of course, his business was not the only one that was suffering. There were plenty of workplaces that seemed to suffer because of the lawsuits they issued against those InGen suckers. He was right on that one. All those scientists were truly suckers to the real deal. That they had made monsters. Now that his life had gone downhill at this time, he soon began to see what it was that had truly stopped the world from turning. The dinosaurs. The story of the decade. Dinosaurs living amongst us. That was what the papers read. Dang, those publicists would have had a heyday writing that mess. But that was when it happened. When he began to question his true beliefs. That mother's cyno whatever it was, and those young ones it had with it. How she tenderly cared for and reminded her of how the lioness of a lion pride were known to take care of her cubs. Not all animals in this world were pure animals. That was a philosophy that he had written himself when coming to this conclusion. But what could he do now? He could barely afford the clothes on his back at this point. He had a mortgage. He had no job. He was so full of debt he could barely even find room for anything else in his life. But that was when he had been visited by Dodgson. He had recently been given some sort of weird, anonymous letter at the time. It was not told as to whom this letter was from. When Dodgson came around, his wily grin on his face, he knew that he may have had some sort of ulterior motives. Some reason for approaching him. Dodgson was impressed by his work and sympathized with him for his current troubles. He then noticed a parchment in his pocket. When asked to take it out, he too looked surprised to see such a thing and suggested they open it. It read, "As a forward toward a one Howard King, your theory on the reliability sequence of feline capacity has shown to access current fields of study in our labs. You can very well see why exactly your research regarding this topic was closed. regarding the stock crash of 2015. Therefore, we give you a recommendation for your future. If ever you are seeking an ulterior form of approach to this category, the option of brain cell testing is always at your door. We are your friends. We wish for you and all others in your field to succeed. Think about it. Signed, H. Whoever in the heck this H could have been, he sure got his path to the present started. Seeking out the hidden address on the back of this message, he found what would one day become the fluid you would think of as the devil's bath salts. Hurasim. With plenty of testing, his theory of feline brain capacity was eventually perfected. It may have taken at least a year and a half of testing, but his work had finally paid off. The only problem was, the animals they tested it on turned more extreme than those with rabies. Several men had been dismembered by the crazed lions. He wished that he could forget the sight of it. Just the mere thought of it made his stomach turn. He had failed again. However, where he saw failure, Dogson had seen opportunity. Now that he was under Dogson's supervision, he had begun to think that there were other views on success in this world, a fine line between the world's best interests and conspiracy. He knew that now he had done it. He had created a serum that made monsters. "Hey, King." He turned his head to see Dogson standing there in the door. "There you are. Listen, I got a reading in our sonar that I think you should see." Sure." King nodded as he stood up. He followed him into the conference room, where several other Biosyn operatives were standing around, staring at the large screen in the wall. You could even see Basilton at the edge of the room, leaning against the wall. "What's the scoop, George?" Dogson asked him. "That tracking device we put on Deeran's boat picked up the location." Basilton went over to the screen, which displayed some sort of map. On the west part of the map, there was a flashing red circle. Dogson wiped his finger across the screen, zooming in on said circle. The circle was on an island at least 207 miles off west of Costa Rica. There was a description on the location which read Sorna. As he zoomed in even further, he saw the red circle standing in the edge of the island. The workers all began to murmur as they all watched the screen. "It seems as though our friends at InGen took a little trip. Let's look at the surveillance footage in the research center," Basilton suggested. "If they want to go anywhere on that island, that's where they go." Dogson nodded and fiddled around with the buttons. Soon another screen was pulled up. This time it seemed to be displaying a kind of live video. It showed the head of the DPG, Claire, standing at a screen similar to theirs, along with their colleagues, watching a video. "Wait a minute." King squinted at the video. "Why are they on the island? It seems that Miss Deering isn't exactly content with the current pecking order." Dogson folded his arms. But why are they watching a video of Wu?" "It is because they seek answers." The new head of Biosyn had made his presence known as the workers parted like the Red Sea. Wu entered the room with the amber staff in his hand. His businesslike expression was held on his face like it was fixed with glue, much like the amber on his staff. He had stuck the pieces back together perfectly, as he had seen John Hammond carry it everywhere he went. It was easy for him to begin his secret affairs without anyone in InGen knowing. His plans were so secretive, he himself would find it difficult to find them if he had lost track of them. Not that he ever did. He was just about one of the most calculating minds on Earth. He stood there as he looked at the screen, his eyes fixated on the red-haired woman in the video. "Claire, Claire, Claire," he said under his breath. "Ever the curious one." Sir?" King stepped closer to him. One glance from the former InGen geneticist was enough to silence. Basilton was the first to speak up after this. "Sir, these guys are close to figuring out everything we're doing. They'll come to find you, sir." Wu did not even look at Basilton. He barely lifted up the staff closer to his face as he examined the reassembled amber. He stared at the frozen mosquito inside with a cold, squinted stare. A pity. Hammond was quite promising, wasn't he, gentlemen? A genius in the works. However, there was one thing that neither he or Miss Ronnie, or even Lockwood, ever considered. Each of the men waited on Wu's every word. Is that these creatures were made for a reason. Not for entertainment like Hammond and Miss Ronnie would have hoped, but to serve humanity. Our very own assets had proven this theory, as some of you may have noticed. Now, the people of this world have neglected to adhere to our promises of perfection, of our protection. And as such, our time to strike is now. We are Biosyn. We do not stand by as the world unravels around us like Engine has. We circle around nothing but humanity's best interests, and we will show them what will happen without our protection. We will show them what Engine has released. They will see the future. At the end of his little speech/tirade, the assembled men began a loud applause, full of loud clapping and scattered cheering among them. King reluctantly obliged with the clapping as he bit his lip. This whole thing sounded like a dictatorship in a company now, and he did not like where it was headed. Dachshund, Basilton, with me. Wu waved over the two Biosyn operatives. It's time we assembled the entire pack. Their biggest role is about to be played. But sir, what about Claire? King was the only one who was still in the room after the men had dispersed. Wu glanced at back at King. She should have stayed on the mainland. All of them. Wake up the hounds. As the head of affairs had left, King turned his face back to the screen. He saw the people still watching the video. And with an uneasy expression, he put his finger on a button that said, Sorna Surveillance 0009847. Immediately, several more video frames popped up. They showed at least 36 large cages that rattled abruptly, as if whatever was in them was extremely raring to escape. Below the surveillance panel was a green button that read Open, right next to a purple one that read Close. Now, working with Dachshund, and then Wu, scared King enough. But there were other things that made his body sprout goosebumps all over. He knew what was in those crates. He saw what they could do to people. He knew what would happen. It made him wish that he was with the crazed lions again. However, he also knew that if he didn't open them, he would face the wrath of Wu. And after the speech that he just heard from him, he decided not to chance it. God forgive me.